Cool.
All right.
Rough.
What was that, Smitty?
I know what I know.
Oh, I was just having a laugh. I haven't got a lot of notes with me today, but I've got some pretty firm ideas about parenting and how we've raised our little girl. So
that's our.
I'm going off the cuff today.
That's our topic for the day.
Yeah. So I think today we're going to talk about sort of parenting and rites of passage and how we're bringing our kids up.
Modern day parenting.
Yeah, modern day parenting. Yeah, maybe with an ancestral twist.
Well,
some of us,
all
depending
four
on
of
how
us.
we've.
Yeah, all four of us have children, so we're not declaring that we're experts at it, but we've had some experience.
We're probably as qualified as anyone to talk about it in our own right, because as usual, we're just talking about our own opinion on things and what works for us, and
That's right.
hopefully people enjoy having a listen.
And for any parent, it doesn't come with a manual. When the baby pops out, you're not given a here's your instruction book. Follow this to the letter, and you will produce the perfect human being.
That is a hectic moment, isn't it, when you have that realisation
Man.
of it's just you
Yeah.
and your wife and your new child,
Yep.
and you just go, holy crap.
Yep. And it's not until a little bit later on that you realise that you're going by your own personal experiences of how your parents treated you and your own value and belief system, I guess, that's been instilled into you. And that's how you carry that over to being a parent. And I guess that's where cycles of good parenting and cycles of bad parenting, unfortunately, can continue.
Definitely. There's a lot of generational stuff there, isn't there?
Mm.
You know, your grandfather did it to your dad, and I'm not talking about bad things, just any sort of parenting style.
Yep.
It can definitely carry down, good and bad.
Yeah. How are you going, Mick, over there in Queensland?
Very good, mate, and really, really excited to dive into this one. And I think that's a really good starting point, Roo, the direction that you've headed there in terms of this generational impact of our parents and our parents' parents and what transcends down and that sort of thing. And I think what it opens up is the discussions about voids and values and all these sorts of things. And I think from the perspective of psychology, what's sort of very pertinent is that often things that we perceive as missing when we were children become really, really important for us as adults. And that I guess the way of simplifying that is, if we perceive something was missing when we were younger, for example, affection or something like that, that's a void. That void then tends to become, for the majority of people, really, really important, and that then becomes a dominant value when they're adults. And if we look at this through the lens of, maybe our fathers. Let's talk about our fathers and the way that we were parented and that generation as a whole. I think it would be fair to say that, they probably didn't receive as much affection and attention and love in the way that we probably provide it to our children from their own fathers.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, that would have been very, very, very important to them as they developed into fatherhood and young men themselves. The issue then become the fact that if you don't actually know how to do something, you've never been shown it, you've never been taught it, you unconsciously direct your children to receive love or affection or this missing void from a position that you thought you received it. Does that make sense?
Just repeat that again, mate, that last bit.
So with our fathers, if they never actually developed the ability to show love or affection, because they were never shown, I think it would be fair to say that, I don't want to speak out of turn, but certainly, my own father, I would say you could probably count on one hand the number of times he was told by his father, my grandfather, that he was loved.
Yep.
And it wasn't because he didn't love him. He certainly loved him. It was his son. but he just didn't know how to say it. He didn't know how to show it. And so being loved and nurtured for my father became a really, really dominant value. But initially, when he became a father himself, he didn't have the traits and attributes and the skills. He'd never been shown. So instinctively, what then happens unconsciously is we direct our children to receive love from where we got it. And that can be a very unconscious thing. And so that's why we find a lot of, in those initial years, and we've spoken about this before, those infancy years, toddler years, the tendency can be to direct the child to the mother, because that's sort of, it seems to be a common place where they can receive love. And I think the really interesting shift universally at the moment is that probably our generation is at a real tipping point for changing this in terms of the way that we communicate with our boys and our children as a whole. And I think that we've spoken pretty consistently about the fact that I think we all do that very similarly. It's, we've all, with the exception of Maddie, 3 of us have got young boys. And I think in particular, the way that I communicate with my son, the way I openly show vulnerability, emotion, and all of these sorts of things is very, very different to how that played out with my own father. Would that be similar to you guys as well?
Definitely, mate. It does for me. My father, if you don't mind me going first, boys, but my dad was a very hard man when I was young, and he never had a father. His father left him, and he was put on the doorstep of his grandparents who brought him up for most of his life. And so his concept of a father was very negative, and he never maybe learnt the role of a father. The grandfather did the best he could, I guess. But my childhood was brought up with an impatient father, high expectations, sort of lived his life or his lack of success through me, like in regards to footy and that sort of stuff. And, there were times where my mum had to separate us in the hallway as I became a teenager, and she would always defend me. There were times where I had to storm back in the house after having an altercation with my dad outside and telling Mum I hated him and stuff like that. And there was never any affection whatsoever with my dad. He didn't know how to express it, and he was a very short-tempered, impatient man. And I just remember having my own son or my own kids and just having this saying, do what my dad didn't do and don't do what my dad did. That's my philosophy as a father now, and I've made a conscious effort to try to break this cycle that my dad was in, and I wanted to break that cycle. So I think I've done that. My kids get a lot of love from me. Our house is a loving house, a loving home. And I have a really, really strong bond with my kids. And my daughter's just turned 16, my boy's 14, and we still hug and we still say we love each other. And, showing of emotion is never withheld. And I'm pretty happy that that's been achieved in our house. But, yeah, I mean, the father, and we can talk about the role of fathers a bit later on as well, but the father is a critical part of the family, and anyone listening here will have experiences with their father, good or bad. But yeah, fathers unfortunately can be pretty unskilled at parenting sometimes, and that can be a lot of effects, causing that.
Roo, out of interest.
So can you see there, though, Roo, that's the perfect example of something you perceived as missing, which created a void in you, then became a really, really pertinent value in how you parented? when you got to have your own children. That's effectively exactly what you've described.
Yeah, and what you were saying before is I received those emotions. I filled that void with my mother. So my mum and I are very close. My mum would always show me affection and love, and that's where I guess I gained that.
Yeah.
And you've obviously made a conscious effort to parent in the style with a lot of care and a lot of love for your children and sort of open communication. But do you find that with your upbringing was your sort of default way that you maybe could have slipped into sort of more like your dad's parenting style? Did you have to really work hard to sort of overcome sort of like being more like your dad, or did it actually come naturally to you to parent in your style?
No, that's a really good question, mate, because every now and then I'll stop myself and realise, fuck, I'm being my father, and particularly with my own impatience. And if something's not working, I'll just lose my shit at something. And my kids have seen me do that. And then I'll quickly realise and I'll say to them, that's not how you should react to kids or respond to that. That's just dad being impatient. But though I think, and you sort of the argument of nature versus nurture, is that trait in me a genetic thing from my father, that impatience, that quick snap of doing your block, or is it something that I've learned? As a young kid, did I see my dad do that, and is that learned? And then, so will my son also see me do that, and probably not as often as my dad did it? Will he learn that trait as well? I hope he won't, because he's a more placid, good-natured boy. But yeah, what you're saying, Smitty, is spot on. I think my own personality is I'm a sort of a sensitive person, and so I can, and the love for my mum, I think, is what I use to bring up my kids. But definitely, little nuances or little bad habits of my dad creep in that I have to check myself on.
I think there's definitely a little bit of imprinting when you're young, isn't there? You're just subconsciously, obviously, soaking in every moment that you're with your parents and you're growing up, and you understand how they're likely to react in a certain situation. And I think definitely if either your mother or your father reacts in a certain negative or positive way to a certain input, I think that definitely imprints in your mind as a young kid.
Yep.
And I think that is a little bit of the, I guess, the nurture side coming into it. You're sort of like a learned behaviour where you're getting that that imprinting of a behaviour. So if you see that enough times as a kid when you're growing up, I think definitely that does get stored somewhere in your mind, and it can be a behaviour that comes out later on.
Yeah, definitely.
It's hard being a parent because it's constant, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, I don't want to sit here and bag my old man.
No.
My old man, he loved me. I know he did. The amount of times he took me down the footy oval and spent a lot of time in that sort of thing. I know he loved me, but and as I've gotten to become a man myself, I look back and I've forgiven my dad for a lot of the bad things that happened between us, because I know that he was just trying his best and he didn't really know. But we now have a lot more knowledge to share and a lot more, I don't know, communication between other dads and stuff like that. And dads are more involved now, that we have a lot more knowledge with regards to parenting. And look at us, four blokes talking about it, and even people listening to us. Back then, in my dad's day, they never had any of that sort of support network or that access to knowledge. So they're just flying by the seat of their pants, they're trying their best, and their best is, probably wasn't good enough really, but they did love us in their own way.
They did operate in a different environment, didn't they? Like sort of culturally or societally, it wasn't as accepted for a man to be emotionally open and vulnerable, and it was more a thing of sort of quiet toughness and just putting up with whatever's thrown at them. But if you go back even 2 generations, our grandparents' generation, they'd just come out of the Second World War. They were very sort of tough people, and there was probably a lot of emotional trauma there from various things that had happened to them during their life and maybe going through a war and mental illness and that sort of thing as well. But whereas now we're encouraged to be more in touch with our emotions as men, and we have taken on more of a nurturing role as well, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But definitely we are sort of operating in a different environment, aren't we? And there are sort of some better, I guess, ideas around what a strong male role model is now versus back then.
Yeah.
It's less about sort of toughness and staunchness, and there is more open nurturing, which is definitely a move in the right direction.
And I guess a lot of dads want to be involved now.
Yeah.
I mean, you, CJ, you've got 2 little ones, and I see you as a great dad. You are very involved with your kids.
I'm very lucky in that I have a lot of time. I have an employment where I can do that. I can be involved in their life. But I listened to your story there, and it sounded quite similar to my dad's story in that he was the one that broke that cycle of.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure his dad loved him plenty, but just that generation, you're right, didn't really know how to express that. And like Mickey was talking before, he definitely made a conscious effort to break that cycle and say, this is how I'm going to do it. And he's been an absolute role model for me as a parent. Still different generations, aren't they? You know, they still have different things. Not that they went through the war, but, you know, Dad was born just after the war. His dad, my granddad, who I never met, you know, had the hardships of the war, and you can't. It's really hard to, in a position where we are, see where they've come from and how much they've progressed, if that makes sense, and because you know you look at. I talk about, you know, and you kind of make fun of your old man a few times, don't you, when they say, oh, I went to school with no shoes on and I had to walk, and, you know, we played in the rubbish tip, you know, we lived out and
Played with asbestos.
Bassendean. Yeah, like all that stuff. You kind of, they just made do. And then you look at all the modern things that we've got now, and, you know, we're all quite comfortable where we are, but, you know, we're not millionaires, we're not sort of lavish, but we're living a pretty good life, you know, and it is difficult. And I you know, I think about it often and thank my old man for having that foresight and nature and nurture. You talk about it, you know, is it in you, you know, because some of the parenting that went on, even from mothers in that era, was real harsh.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the maternal stuff that we have now. You know, go to mum, get a hug, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. It was, some of it was fairly cold.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, especially some of the things that went on in that generation. Like my granddad, so it's not far away. He was the middle child of, I think it was 8, and got shipped off to orphanages because they couldn't afford to have him.
Wow.
How's that?
Yeah.
Like,
Couldn't afford to have him. Wow.
couldn't afford. Oh,
Yeah.
no. He's the youngest.
Yep.
My grandma, my great grandma, great granddad passed away. She worked in a hotel. I don't know if she was the madam of the hotel, but, you know, and then she married someone
She was
from
the
the hotel.
receptionist, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And couldn't afford to have my granddad
Wow.
with the new husband, and
Last
said,
in, first out.
"There you go, see you later."
Nice.
So you just look at that and you go, that's a completely different environment. That
Different times, hey?
We've grown up with, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thank my old man for having the foresight and going, well, you're not going to live how we lived. You are going to, and if I'm a bit harsh, then I know I've had the experience.
Yeah.
And he was a great mate. Still is. He's still with us.
Yeah.
Present
But
tense.
when I was a young fella, you know, I'd kick the footy with him. I'd play cricket in the front yard with him. I'd be, you know, and he's a school teacher, so it's great. You know, he'd finish at school, and we'd hang out.
Yeah.
We'd be buddies. And I never went through that phase of being embarrassed by my old man. I would always, you know, if I play footy, I'd want to know what he thought, get a hug from him, you know, tell him everything was all right. Or, you know, he'd tell me everything's all right, you know. And then he'd say, you're fucking lazy, you need to run more. You know, that kind of thing. You know, you'd get some honest feedback.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely helps with my parenting. I'm probably a bit too sensitive. You know, I'm hugging all the time, probably a bit over the top.
I think
you know?
that's great. I don't think there's
I
too
don't
much
think
hugging.
there's ever.
No, yeah, I know. I just often feel like then the kids come to you for solutions in bad times, which I guess they're young, you know, but sometimes it builds a bit more resilience if you, not hands off, but, you know, I want to fix everything. And, you know, if my kid's crying or something's upset them, I'm going to go in and sort it out for them. But one of the things I've learned as a parent is I don't want to do anything for my kids that they can do themselves. So, Dad, I need a glass of water. You know where it is. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to sitting on the couch. I'm not going to go get you a glass of water.
Yeah.
And then that also applies to, you know, fixing your own problems. Not being hands off, but offering solutions. And if they can sort things out for themselves, I would rather see them get themselves out of the bind that they're in. And you know, when kids are young, it might not be anything massive. It might be the ability to, I don't want to make a decision between, am I going to have a sandwich for lunch and a sausage roll? Arbitrary thing. But, you know, if you can't make that decision and you go sit in your room and you sulk about it, well, I can't fix it for you. Here's some solutions. You got to come up with that issue yourself. I think that builds a bit of resiliency and whatnot. But yeah,
Mate, and before you go, Mick, because I know you wanted to cut in there, I love that story, Jonesy, and it sort of indicates that you're a generation sort of ahead of us.
yeah. I was
You know what I
thinking
mean?
that when you were telling your story.
Yeah, so your dad was sort of like me and Smithy now,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean, and you're a product of that breaking of the cycle.
Yeah.
Whereas my kids will be the product of my breaking the cycle.
Yes.
So
yes.
you're a generation ahead. So
Yeah.
that's a really cool story, man. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
but I do that all the time. I wonder if that's a dad thing, the impatience. Like you listen to the stories you're telling them. I do that all the time. I can't put together this IKEA bit of furniture, and I throw the spanner. Fuck, you know.
Yeah.
And you get a bit grumpy, and then I see my kids do it,
Yeah.
and I thought, oh man,
Yeah.
that's not ideal. But they've definitely learnt that from me.
Yeah. Oh, how many times have you heard someone say that, you know, their 3-year-old's gone,
Yeah.
and just copying, you know?
Yeah.
Mick, what did you want to input, mate? What did you say?
I think Jonesy's just summed up the first point that's probably a bit of a takeaway in terms of consideration, which is environment. And the environment that our grandfathers were in, which created a hardness, not just grandfathers, but grandmothers, people in general, created a hardness. And that I think that generationally, things have continued to shift, and the environment has continued to change. And I think we're going to potentially talk about some big environmental concerns in terms of what our own children and families face currently. I think the other thing Jonesy spoke about is with us parenting the way that we do, and it's an interesting point to consider. I stumbled on a quote this week, and it was from a post-apocalyptic author, and it was, hard times create strong men create good times, good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And
It's a cycle.
It's a cycle, absolutely. And so it really made me consider, and the reason I sort of wanted to just pop this little thought in here now is because Jonesy was talking a lot about this instinct that we have for our own children to jump in and to as these affectionate protectors that we're evolving into. You know, Jonesy's still looking for avenues to develop that resilience, but I think we've all had the experience, or certainly I have, of you know, say one of our kids is having a tough time at school. You know, maybe there's some issues with friendships or something like that, and you want to just jump in and you want to solve it. And we're really robbing our kids of opportunities to develop that really strong resilience set that we probably even had to develop, guys. You know, I would say certainly my father was definitely more like Jonesy's dad in the context of I was definitely told I was loved, there was affection, there was all of those things. But even the way that I do it is very different. And I do wonder, you know, it was the experiences I had that made me competitive and driven and all of these things. And it is an interesting question, certainly considering that quote, to think about what will our own kids be like, having had all of this extra affection and all these sorts of things. Now, no doubt they'll be empathetic, they'll be worldly, there'll be all of these great traits and characteristics. But what's the trade-off? You know, if this is a cyclical experience, you know, is there a negative trade-off there? And I think that's a really interesting thing to consider.
Well, that is a great quote, and interestingly, we didn't talk about it before on the podcast. You know, before we didn't set that up at all. But that I've read that recently as well, and I've thought a lot about it, and thinking that we are on the end of that cycle. You know, we are in some good times. Well, maybe not the last couple of years, but you know, we are a fairly affluent society. We're not really going through any wars. We're not building resilience or hard men in any way. And how do you go about getting that or finding that or finding that balance? You know, well, what are we doing? How do we get that for our kids?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of studies out there that also prove that even just being a father present.
You know, I love a study.
You do love your studies.
I know you've got a study up your sleeve.
I don't have a study.
Is it a Japanese study? Do you like your Japanese studies?
They do some good studies.
They're busy.
But no, there are studies that show that an active father in the family environment actually even just contribute naturally to a child's development of self-esteem, self-confidence, inner growth and strength. So that sort of inner growth and that strength or even resilience can be developed by having that father around, just having them involved in the family. And I read a good quote, and this is from some child psychiatrist called Kyle Pruitt. And he said, a father's more active play style and comparatively slower response to a toddler or infant experiencing frustration serve to promote problem-solving competencies and independence in the child. So, and I thought about that, and that's so true because when we are active with our play, we encourage sort of rough play, wrestling, competition, stuff like that. I remember doing that with my kids when they were little. But also I noticed that when my kids were struggling with something, I didn't jump in straight away to try to solve it. And I guess that that is a natural thing that fathers maybe do. And that
you want to fix things.
You do.
You
but
want to let
there is
them.
A time where you've got to hold back and let them work it out themselves. And therein lies just an easy way of developing that sort of self-reliance for a child.
Yeah.
I remember seeing my young bloke sit up on the top lawn in our backyard for half an hour trying to tie his shoelaces. And he did not stop. And this is a trait that he has today, that he will continue with something until he perfects it or until he can achieve it. And he sat up there for half an hour, I reckon, until he could tie his shoelace up. Yeah. And I just sat in the kitchen and I watched him. And I wasn't going to interfere, and I didn't even really think about interfering. I just let him do it. And he achieved it.
That's almost a source of pride, I think, for a father, watching your son or daughter having the the sort of drive and the determination to solve a problem like that. That's it's almost like a bit of a milestone, watching your kid tie their shoelaces, isn't it? Like, that's a big deal when you're a kid and you finally work out how to tie your shoelaces.
It's a rite of passage to tie your shoes, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that that quote. I think it's an awesome quote, and it resonates with me on a lot of levels. I don't know how I feel about that as a child raising quote. Definitely open for the debate on it. I'd have to think about it for a bit, but I don't think being a hard man for your children will necessarily generate good times. I think being a caring, loving, present parent,
yeah, you're probably right.
Is the way to go, or is the way that my wife and I have chosen to raise our daughter. I think metabolically that's a really good saying. I think if you lived your life like that, in terms of like having a lot of little hormetic stresses all the time, I think that's a really good way to live a healthy sort of physical life.
Yeah.
I don't know if it works or not. I know Mikey has
saying.
the most background out of all of us, obviously quite the way along with a psychology degree, but I don't know how I feel about it.
I get what you're saying. You don't have to have you don't have to have a war.
No,
I was probably being a bit extreme. You don't have to have the Great Depression to go through a hard time.
Yeah.
A hard time could be a hard workout or
most definitely,
tough weeks. Going and everyone's going to do it, and my daughter's about to go through or go to high school. Going to high school, that's hard.
It is.
It's going to be a hard time.
Yeah,
for
it will
us.
be. Yep.
That's something that we're talking about all the time, and that hardness or going through that difficult period will build resilience, will build problem solving skills, etc. Yeah. So when I agree, you don't need a hard time of
Depends what you mean by hard, doesn't it? I mean, it can obviously be taken in a lot of different ways, and it's a killer quote. I've come across it before, and it really resonated with me when I read it. But it's just it's all about.
I think if you extend it out though, and I went deep diving once I read this quote because it really struck a chord with me, and there was an extension of it, and it was my grandfather didn't have a car. He used to walk to work at a point in time. My father walked to work. My parents arrived in Australia with a couple of 100 pounds to their name, and we lived on the floor in a church when we first got here. So having a car, even when my dad then had his own family, just one vehicle to transport us all around, and was a real luxury. It was. We had made it almost because we had a vehicle to transport us, mum and dad to and from work and all of that sort of thing. So granddad walked, dad walked for a period of time. He managed to get himself a car. Well, I turned 18 and I was gifted a 92 Hyundai Excel. So I was actually given a car when I was old enough to have a car. That was my parents saying, that was almost that rite of passage. We've created a life for our family and son. This is what we'd like you to have. And I think about my kids and how hard my wife and I have worked, and touch wood. He won't need to be in a 92 Excel. He's probably lucky enough to get something relatively new.
Oh, he'll probably get a 2020 Prado or something, won't he?
Probably
rolling in the dough.
An electric car, I reckon.
Bloody silver spooners.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. The interesting topic then becomes at what point, and this is the I guess the thing I'm considering all the time is, what is this balance, and how can we still instill these values of hard work in order to create a strong man? And what is that modern context of strong man? I think that's the really interesting thing for us to talk about, because I totally agree with you, Matty, and I'll never shift how I am with my kids. You know, like the most joyful part of my day is when the kids get up in the morning, they come straight into me and my wife, they hop into bed, and we just get a cuddle for half an hour before we get ready for school. Like, I absolutely love it. And my son is, you know, super affectionate. But I am considering, you know, not how can I flip that upside down and completely disrupt his life, but what points through his life, what lessons can I impart on him? What challenges can he be faced with that I can leave him to deal with a watchful eye on him, so that I can still develop a strong man that can pass on these values? Because we don't just want to make it fucking easy for these guys. We don't.
Yeah.
Because we still want the work ethic. We still want the drive. We still want all of these things. We just want them to be able to communicate effectively with their own children when they have them, show love, nurture, show affection, all of these great traits that, you know, God bless, we've come to start to place an importance on. But we still want them to have all of these things. And I think that's more where I leaned into the quote, is what is this balance? What is this careful balance? What does a strong man mean to me in the modern context?
That's a great point, Mick, and that's where I reckon that quote is sort of leading towards, is maybe the softness of modern day life and its easy conveniences.
Correct.
And how that influences the development of young personalities. And, you know, like you were saying, your grandfather and your father walking to work and that sort of thing. You know, when I was in primary grade 2, I used to ride half an hour to school. I'd come home and mum and dad would be at work and I was on my own. I'd let myself into the house and I'd be at home for an hour and a half, whatever, until mum and dad got home.
Isn't that funny? You too. That's early.
Yeah.
But that's probably what happened, right?
Yeah.
And we're, you know, we think about these days, we're worried about, you know, your 10, 12-year-old kid doing that.
Yeah.
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 Sometimes it necessitates building that kind of
Yeah,
resilience
now
and
my
responsibility.
kids have been driven to school every year,
Yeah,
every year of their school life, because the schools are further away from our suburb and that sort of thing. So, you know, they've missed out on some sort of independence development, I guess. But I guess with all this comfort around us, this is where the importance of throwing our kids into environments that are challenging. And that's where I reckon, like, as a dad, a simple thing you can do is go camping. You know, camping just throws kids out of that comfort zone. And you get them in a tent. It's colder. You know, they're out in the bush. You know, you can do a few little camp activities and stuff like that. And I sort of fall back on my teaching days. You know, and building a fire, collecting wood, going exploring. You know, working out where north, south, east, and west is, and that sort of stuff. And just I would really recommend that sort of, you know, those activities when your kids are young, in particular, to throw them out of that comfort zone of everyday life.
Yeah. I know we wanted to talk about rites of passage as a sort of, and I really thought in the modern context, what are we talking about? You know, and I thought the same thing. So, well, modern day, is that going camping? Is that sort of sending your kids on a school camp so they're away from you, you know, and they have got to build some tools around not always having mum and dad there and that crutch to lean on all the time.
Yep.
I was kind of struggling to come up with that concept of the rites of passage in a modern context. But, and then I was coming around to, well, I don't really think it needs to be ancestral man and you go out and hunt a bear and you either live or die and you come back with the bear skin. And if you do, everyone cheers and you're now a man. You know, I can see why that kind of thing may have drifted away, because as parents, you know, I don't really want to send my kid out there. He's my legacy. I want to keep them. I don't really want to, because what if they don't come back?
Yeah.
But then again, I guess you train them to say, okay, well, you've now got the skills, and maybe that's what that rite of passage is. And in a modern context, I was thinking, what is that going to be for us? And camping is definitely one of them. That was one of the ones that I was coming up with, especially coming just back from having done some camping.
Oh yeah.
It's it is it's a good one.
It's throwing your kids out there into an unstable or unpredictable environment. And I guess this is where
There's weather.
and I guess this is where the fault of modern day helicopter parenting comes into it as well. So that parent that's always sort of keeping an eye on their kids or following them around. I'm a big believer, and I've always let my kids fall and injure themselves. Obviously, you're always aware that they're not going to, injure themselves drastically or permanently, head injuries and drowning and that sort of stuff. You're always cautious of that. But I let my kids climb trees. We've got a nice big jacaranda out the front, and I've let my kids climb that. And all I've just said is, look, make sure that you've got 2 points of contact at least, a foot and a hand that is in a permanent position. And then I've just let them go for it. They've never fallen out of the tree, and they've got to the very tip of it. And I've walked out sometimes and go, shit, bloody hell, they're high. And they're on a precarious branch, but they've worked themselves into a position, blah, blah, blah. But I've always believed that my kids need to hurt themselves to learn and, again, build up that personal resilience of getting hurt and learning from the experience of how they got hurt.
That's great. I'm big on natural consequences.
Yes.
So we're going outside. This is similar to yours. You're going outside. You give the kids the knowledge. You say, okay, well, we're going outside. It's quite cold. You're in shorts and a t-shirt. Do you think you'll be cold? Maybe. Do you want a jumper? No. Okay, that's fine. I've given you the knowledge that outside is cold. Mm-hmm. We're going to go outside. We're going to go for a run around. We're going out to lunch, whatever it might be. You bring a jumper if you want. Don't bring one if you don't. And if you get out there and you tell me you're cold, well, that's a consequence of sort of not taking some advice.
That's right, yeah.
And that's similar.
That's sort of empowering your kids, isn't it?
Yeah,
like you're giving them, you're showing them that you have the trust in them that they can make their own decisions.
Yep.
And then there is a minor consequence which may or may not work out for them. So they might get a bit cold, or
yeah.
For my daughter,
they might be uncomfortable. But
for my daughter, she never wants to wear clothes when it's cold, and she never wants to wear shoes. And if she does want to wear shoes, she wants to wear gumboots with no socks. So we say to her, look, you can go outside either in bare feet or in gumboots with no socks, but you're going to get blisters.
Yeah.
And we've let her make that decision. She's sort of 4 years old, and she's come back with a blister on her foot before. And we said, look, we told you that was going to happen, but she understands that she can make that choice. So we're sort of giving her that almost like that self-esteem to show that we trust her enough to make the choice. We're never going to let her do something really dangerous. And then she gets to deal with the consequence. And that's life, isn't it?
That's right.
And it's the same as climbing a tree. You're showing your kid, you're giving them some tools, some knowledge. So saying, okay, keep your points of contact and that sort of thing. But you're showing them that you trust them enough, and you're giving them the knowledge and the tools to let them explore that. And that's really good, isn't it? That's a really important part of life, is to be given the keys to that task. Here's how you do it. Go off and do it.
Yep.
There are some consequences, but you're showing them that you trust them enough to do it.
Yeah.
And that's huge. That's good for their self-esteem. Oh, Dad thinks I'm big enough and capable enough to climb the tree. And when you're a little kid, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and intrinsically they know their limits, I reckon, and they climb that tree and they go, oh, that's a bit far, it's a bit scary. I'm not going to go that one today. Maybe tomorrow, maybe I'll try that again. And empowering them to make those decisions and come up with that themselves, I think is awesome.
And I think this is where the importance of father comes into it, because, and I did a little bit of research on different parenting styles, and I'm definitely not bagging mothers' styles here, but they complement each other. So a father
definitely
encourages sort of risk taking. So sort of like, say, let's just use the climbing of the tree example. they encourage competition, they encourage independence, and they encourage risk taking. Where a mother will promote more care and less and more a more sense of security with the kids. And I'm not saying that one style is or the one nature of the parent is better than the other.
Yin and yang, you got to have both.
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely. You've got to have that mother's influence. Like, you've got to have the mother come out and look at the kid in the tree and go, and give her sense of care and her sense of concern. But you've also got to have that balance of the father going, yeah, get to the top.
Yeah.
Just make sure you do this and that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if you fall, it's on you. You know,
Yeah.
blah blah blah.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to have that balance, and I think that's really important.
I think ancestrally, I mean, that's why male and female would have paired up together and have done so for millions of years probably, is that, one, parenting's hard. You can't really do it on your own. Well, you can, you know, definitely.
There are great single parents out there, yeah.
Definitely, but you kind of need people around you to give you a hand, don't you? You know, I guess that's why, you know, even in the caves and the tribes, you would have paired up and sort of lived together and done that kind of thing.
Yeah. I read a good quote. It said, dads tend to see their child in relation to the rest of the world. Mums tend to see the rest of the world in relation to their child. I found that quite an interesting one. And from a father's point of view, to see their child in relation to the rest of the world, I don't know whether you guys agree to that, but I'm always thinking about how my child is going to fit in, and their personalities will fit into the world.
Yeah, definitely. There's natural consequences to that too. You know, the way you behave on the playground. If you are selfish and don't share, you're probably not going to have any friends. But if you can learn to interact with people, share, play nicely, all those personality traits, you're going to have plenty of friends. So it's interesting, you know, the natural consequence of, you know, not being such a nice person is, you know, you probably not going to have any friends. And then, and I'm not saying, you know, at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, you are not a nice person. It's just that you haven't developed that yet. And then if you are learning these consequences of, oh, if I share and I'm nice to people, more people will play with me and I have more friends and more interaction, and you learn, okay, that's how I need to behave. Yeah.
I think also kids go through a lot of stages, don't they? Like, they don't often
definitely.
have the emotional stability at different times during their life to, like, I remember cringing when my daughter was a bit younger at certain times, and she'd go through certain phases. You think, oh my God, but
Yeah.
it's just like a short-term thing often, and
Yeah. I mean,
they go through limit testing phases and they go
yeah.
through all those different times. But
No.
I think as parents, the trap is as well, you want to be seen to have that really well-behaved kid that really fits into society, and
Yeah.
it's often not the case with your kid, depending on, like, developmentally where they are, and then it's the sort of trap of, like, am I doing this because I want to be seen to be, you know, have a really good child, or am I doing this because it's what I should do for the kid? So I think it's hard sometimes to sort of suck it up and swallow it and think, like, well, you're obviously going to stop them if they're doing something really inappropriate, but at the same time, you've got to let them find their limits and sort of find who they are. So
I think
it's a balance, isn't it, being a parent?
I think you
Real balance.
forget they're only little sometimes, and it's not just, you know, they're going through changes all the time. They're growing teeth. You know, they're getting there's hormonal development all the time. It's not just, you know, hitting puberty and then we're getting hormones. You know, 6 or 7 young boys, they go through, you know, a burst of testosterone, and you kind of forget that influences their behavior, you know, and it makes them tired and makes them grumpy. And sometimes you can't really work out what's going on until you kind of sit back and realize, okay, well, there's some physiological things going on as well. You know, being patient is a great one, isn't it? Not jumping to snapping all the time and, you know, what's wrong with you? You know, sitting back and thinking, okay, something's going on here. You know?
I always make an effort to just ask my kids, you know, how you going? Like, just sit down with them and say what's going on. just try to get into their mind and just get them to start talking.
Yeah.
With a teenage girl, it can be quite difficult, but as soon as you,
But
as soon as
if
crack
you're opening
that
those
surface,
channels, that's great. Yeah.
and as long as they know that that channel is there,
Yeah.
just keeping that line of communication. I think communication with your kids is absolutely paramount.
I feel like in the next few years, with my daughter being 11, I'll be ringing you up a lot for some advice.
Yeah. Oh, look,
What
mate,
do I do here?
It's a massive adjustment for a father, particularly if you're close to your daughter when they're young. And Smithy, you've got a young daughter, and so do you, Mick, and you do Jonesy as well. But my daughter and I were very, very close. She was very much a daddy's girl, and it took a massive adjustment period for me when she became a teenager and started becoming independent. You know, it was sort of I was sort of heading towards 50. You know, I'm going through my own life changes as well. But my daughter was going through some massive changes, and from a little girl that was always wanted to be around dad and hugging, and you know, we'd dance in the kitchen and stuff like that, and for her just to distance herself from me, it broke my heart.
Yeah, I've got this coming up.
Yeah, man, it is brutal. It is absolutely brutal. But it took me a while to adjust and to learn and to realise that is her becoming her own independent young woman.
Yeah.
And I take pride in the young woman that she is becoming because she has got good morals. She's a good kid. Yeah. She works hard at school. She can be easily influenced, I think.
They all can at that time,
yeah,
can't they?
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be cool and fit in. And
yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I've done the groundwork.
Yeah, for sure.
What do they say? The first 7 years is you create your person.
Yeah.
It's that I can let her go now to the point where she's got a young friend who's a boy coming over to spend time at the house. They spend time in the bedroom together. I'm pretty confident that they're not doing anything. Everyone that I say this to have a laugh at me. I remember talking to one of our other friends, and he was telling me.
Can one of you guys just pass through a tissue there, please?
But, I know, and you know what, to be honest, as a father, I would rather, if she was doing anything with a boy, that she was doing it in my house and not somewhere else. As much as that sort of wigs me out thinking about it, I would rather that be the case. They're going to do it anyway. They're young humans. They are experimenting with sexuality and whatever. And I don't think anything's going on. I think they're two innocent kids.
Yeah.
But if they were, then all the better for it happening under my roof than somewhere else. And that tells me that my daughter is comfortable in her home environment to be able to express herself in that sort of way. And now I might be sounding like a pussy of a dad here, but the boy's never gonna ever sort of like rule the roost in my house. Like, he came over the weekend, and I was in the study on the computer, right, and I knew he came in through the kitchen door, and to go into my daughter's area of the house, he would have had to pass me and see me in the study. Now, I didn't look back. I just waited for him to come in and say, "Hello, how are you? I'm here." Blah, blah, blah. He never did. So when he left, I said, "Oh, g'day, mate. How you going? I didn't even know you were here. Hey, next time, how about you come and say g'day and let me know you're here?" "Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay, yeah, catch you later." And I said, "Yeah, no, he's a good kid."
But how good is that of you,
Yeah, well, I just wanted him to know that there are expectations. And then when he left, I told my daughter he failed the test there. There was a little test I was just giving him there, because I expect a young man coming into my house to greet me, because this is my house. He needs to greet me. And I said, he can greet me with, "Hi, Mr. Stevens." And my daughter said, "What, Mr. Stevens?" And I said, "Yeah. That's what you should call all the parents of your friends when you go over there, and let the parent tell you that it's okay to call them by their first name." And I will tell him, as soon as he calls me Mr. Stevens, I'll say, "No, that's okay. You can call me whatever."
Another test.
Yeah.
Tick that off the list.
Yeah.
But it's nice of you to do that, because can you imagine, you remember being a 16-year-old boy going to a girl's house with their parents there. It's scary, right?
Yeah, but the
you're
thing
not
is, mate,
quite-
back in those days, I would have gone to them and shook their hand and said, "Hi, Mr. So and So."
Yeah, yeah. I guess.
Well, maybe I didn't.
Yeah, I don't. Well,
Yeah, it's easy to say.
yeah,
later on,
yeah.
isn't it?
I mean, different personalities. He might be a shy young man. He just
Yeah.
might need
Mm.
that little
Little prompts.
invitation that you gave him to not be so nervous. Because, mate, you're intimidating. Get in there, you jacked 50-year-old. You know, come to visit your daughter. You're like, oh, geez,
Sitting
this
in a
guy's
study
gonna-
with his jocks
Yeah.
You mean you had jocks on today?
on. Yeah, yeah. Just finished my cold water immersion, dude.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Not much to see here.
I was going to say, he wouldn't be looking that impressive.
You'd end up being like a normal fella.
Yeah.
But
But,
what
you know,
you've just described there is a rite of passage. That's exactly what you've just described
Yeah,
for
yeah.
your daughter. You have just described an expectation as she evolves into, I don't know what you would actually call adolescence. It's a period within adolescence where, like you said, she's moving into sexuality exploration, being attracted to the opposite sex, these sorts of things. And you're setting an expectation, a rite of passage that, hey, I completely support this as your father, and I will create a safe environment for you to interact. However, this is an expectation I have under my roof, and I think that's absolutely fucking fantastic.
yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with having expectations.
No.
I think the expectation that I've always instilled in my kids is always respect the mother, and that I think is an old school tradition that I believe also needs to be continued. Always respect the mother. No one swears in front of the mother. I don't swear in front of my mum. I find it a little bit uncomfortable when grown men swear in front of their mothers.
Yeah. I'm big on that too.
Yeah, I think the utmost that a father can do to create that harmony in the family environment is to always display and expect the mother's respect my mother. And it also helps, the children see you as the father working in tandem with mum, and I reckon that's a key. One thing that I would always recommend as a parent is always support each other, even though you might slightly disagree with what your partner's saying in front of the kids.
United front.
Be a united front, back each other
Totally.
up. I think that's really important. Then maybe you can have talk about it afterwards and say, "Oh, geez, wasn't really 100% on board with that one, Dal." But
Dull.
but anyway, I'll we'll stick to it. Yeah, I think you've got to show a united front, and the kids need to see that.
Yeah.
Jonesy, you were saying earlier, and this is a really cool one, I think, to dive into a little bit, is when you were looking at rites of passage, you didn't really know where to go. And I was a little bit similar. So I started to think about it from the lens of what are the lessons that I'd like to, or the key lessons I'd like to pass on to my children in terms of life skills, survival, or just living. And what I actually did over the weekend, guys, was I sat down with the kids when we were having lunch, and I started a conversation with them about, what are some things that you think mum and dad have, and I didn't use this language, but effectively tried to instill within you. And we actually came up with 4 things. My daughter's 8 and my son's 5. So the way that they framed it is a little bit differently to what I'll say, but I'll explain that. And I'm interested to see what your lessons are as well. But the first one that they said that and this is literally what my daughter said, you and mum are always going on about that, is about the importance of breathing and meditating. And she said, I meditate every day. And that's something we've been really strong on with the kids from the perspective of managing, monitoring, mediating their own stress. So that was one really, really important one for us. Another one was, and this was my young bloke, he said, well, you make me make my bed in the morning and we have to do chores. And we went on to talk about that, and we said that that was about respecting yourself and respecting your belongings, and you have to contribute within the home. And we had this conversation about why that was important. And the next two I really, really loved were Jai, my son said to me, he said, you're constantly telling me that I should be kind to people. And one of the things we've spoken about with the kids is about seeking opportunities to do random acts of kindness. And I was watching him at school the other day when I dropped him to school, and they have to line up with their lunch boxes and their different bits and pieces. And there was a little girl next to him whose parents weren't there in the morning, and she couldn't carry all her stuff in. And it was just something simple, but he just picked up her drink bottle and he said, I'll carry that in for you. And he's only 5 years old. And I don't know, maybe that's a really common thing to do. But as his dad observing him, I thought, you know what, that actually showed a level of awareness that I didn't expect. And it was just like something that he just did without thinking. And it made me proud in the moment, because I thought, you know what, this is rubbing off. Yeah, and the last one, which my daughter said, and then I'll let you go, was you're constantly telling me to work hard at swimming. So when we go down to squad swimming, when the kids it's always after school, and the kids will have something to eat. And then I'll say to my daughter and my son as they're going off, you're only here for, my son's in the water for 40 minutes and my daughter's in for 75, but I'll say you're only here for a short amount of time. Work your hardest while you're here. And the message there that I'm trying to impart on the kids is anything is possible if your intention is matched by hard work. And so they're four really clear messages that we dissected as a family on the weekend, and they're four things that I think there's probably others that are really, really important as well, but really, really important for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really, it's great that you actually talk about it with your family. I think we definitely have similar. I'm going to use that tonight. I reckon ask the kids what they think, and I would hope that they would say similar things. Contribution. We make the kids do some work around the house, and we don't tie anything monetarily to it. I mean, they have chores that they get paid for, but some of the stuff that they have to do is to contribute to the family. Feed the dog, empty the dishwasher, those kind of things. Do some washing, do some of your own washing. You're doing that to contribute to the family because everyone's working hard. Everyone's part of a team, and that the kindness one. I think you should be quite proud of that.
That's great.
I do a lot of work with kids in around sort of schools, sporting clubs. You don't often see that kind of behaviour, and it's interesting you say that. I watched my young fella play footy on the weekend. A young guy got an award, a best player award. Probably not the best player. He struggled a bit, and my young bloke went over there and put his arm around him and patted him on the back, and I thought it was amazing. So stuff like that, watching your kids, or just kids in general, that doesn't happen often. So you can definitely take away from that you're doing something right, and your kids are a good kid.
That's what I was going to say to you, and you guys should be proud that those sort of behaviours are just demonstrating your impact on their development, and you should be really proud, and you should take a note of gratification, or success in that, because that's your I don't know, parenting's development of your child influence coming out and demonstrating in that sort of way.
Knowing that those four things, whether you kind of discuss them like you have, Mickey, or know that they are overarching sort of statements or mission statements of your family, underlying that you are kind of continually upholding, I guess pushing that forward with your kids. I guess to verbalise it is great, which you have done, Mick, but I guess hopefully, they know it intrinsically rather than, you don't have to point it out, if that makes sense. But I think it's good
Yeah.
that you did.
Yeah,
You know,
it's good to verbalise
yeah.
things.
One of ours would be, we've got a little. My wife's got a painting on the wall. Everyone's weird to someone. You know, so everyone's weird. I'm weird. Everyone's weird. You know, like I dance and sing around like a lunatic in the house. You know, and often get, oh, you're a bit weird. Yeah, well, everyone's a bit weird, so you just need to be, tolerant of everyone. You know, everyone's a little bit weird in their own way.
Mate, I reckon that's just an awesome thing about being a dad is you
Yeah.
can just be wacky and
Yeah,
weird,
yeah,
you know, and just you can be a comic, you know,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can be a dancer, you know.
Yeah.
We've always got music on in the house,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
find music is really important. It can encourage moods. It
Yeah.
can bring people together. You know, we try to sing. My kids know a lot of 80s music, you know.
yeah.
And I think, it's important. And, you know, talking about chores and stuff like that, I would really, we got a dishwasher. Most people have a dishwasher. I'd really recommend making sure at the end of dinner, and there's another thing, having dinner together,
Yeah,
But
yeah, that's a big one.
doing the dishes together. Having to do the dishes manually, you will find, try it with your kids, doing the dishes is a great time for families to talk
yeah.
Have a chat, yeah.
and have a chat. My kids doing the
Be a
tea
bit
towel
silly,
whipping
yeah.
thing. You know, they're piss farting around, and they're practicing on me. I'm washing the dishes, and they're using my ass to practice the towel whipping thing. But I love it, you know. And
Yeah.
the dishwashing time is actually quite a dynamic little time. My kids wrestle, they fuck around, and I'll let them do it.
Yeah.
Because they'll get to the dishes. They'll get to the dishes in time, and they'll complete it. You know, now my daughter's getting up and she's washing, and my young blokes, they're starting to do it themselves. But
Yeah.
I think it's really important. Just something simple like that
Yeah.
can bring the family together over a chore, and it makes the chore sort of enjoyable.
Yeah.
But going back to dinner together, I reckon that's imperative.
Yeah.
As a
that's
father,
good.
really try to be strict with that. Like we just have maybe Friday nights and Saturday nights. We'll sit in front of the telly having something different. But every other night we sit together at the dinner table and we talk.
I agree. I
over
think that's
dinner.
a big one.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think a really good one is learning to take care of an animal.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone other than yourself,
that
yeah.
responsibility and that care and that love that you give to another living thing. So for us at home, my little girl, well, she's only 4, so she doesn't exclusively take care of them, but she mostly takes care of our flock of chickens, and she's got a little pony as well.
Awesome.
So part of our morning ritual or routine is that she'll go out and she'll open up the chickens because they've got to be locked away at night due to foxes and stuff like that. So we'll open the door to the chickens, and then as soon as they come out, they're starving. So we've got 2 different types of food. So she'll have to put the food out for them. And then she's got to make sure they've got water. And part of it is also making sure that their coop is clean. So once a week or so, usually with mum, she'll go out there. And again, she's not quite old enough to do it herself, but she helps, usually Suze, my wife, sometimes me, clean out the chicken coop and make sure they got like good conditions. And then even to the point that we've hatched a few baby chickens from eggs. So we get, because we've got roosters and chickens, so we get fertilised eggs. And if we get a clucky chicken, she'll sit on the eggs, and then we'll watch, and eventually you get a few more little baby chickens come out, and then she has to care for them. So we'll put them in a separate little box, and we'll make sure that they're warm and they've got enough water and they've got their little heat lamp running. And it's like a whole process. It's almost like a process of life where she's making sure they've got all the conditions, like the warmth and the heat, the water, the food, and everything like that, just to almost be solely responsible for another life.
Yeah.
And it's the same with their horse, like go out and brush it and give it love and sort of teach it a few commands and connect with it by riding and things like that. But I think it's a really good way to give her responsibility and the self-esteem that it's sort of like her job to do that.
Yeah, mate, that's
And
awesome.
it's a real nurturing type thing as well. And she loves it.
Teaches some empathy. you know,
Exactly
it's-
right, yeah.
It's, yeah,
Yep.
it's great.
She'll see if one's
an
injured
adult.
or anything like that. And most of our chickens are really tame now because she's quite nice to them, so she can pick them up and pat them, and they enjoy having cuddles. And yeah, it's her little way of connecting with nature and being outdoors, and also, getting to nurture and look after another living being.
Yeah, and not
it's
only just that
important.
emotional development that your daughter's receiving from that, but you were also giving her responsibilities and tasks.
Exactly.
You know, and from a young age, she's doing jobs. She's working. She's realising responsibility.
Yep.
That's fantastic, mate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just all going to benefit her
Yeah.
in the long run.
And it's something that she wants to do. It's not like a chore for her.
Yeah.
It's actually like a real drive. Like she knows it's her job to look after those. So sometimes in the morning we'll be having a lazy morning and she'll be like, Daddy, we've got to let the chickens out. It's like, oh, yeah, we do.
Yeah,
Go
she's all
outside
over
and
it.
take the kitchen scraps out and give them the scraps. And
Good.
yeah, it's a nice little way to get her outdoors as well. And
Yeah, well, you're quite fortunate with your semi-rural sort of environment there, aren't you? That she can go out and immerse herself in nature and put her hands in dirt and soil and
that could be a dog or a cat or a bird or
Yep.
even a goldfish or anything really for any sort of person. But I think just looking after another living animal, I think is a really good way to teach kids responsibility, and it's usually in a way that they quite enjoy.
Yep.
So I think kids enjoy looking after even a fish. As a kid, I had a fish and clean the tank and change the water and give it some food and
it also, like thinking of at the other end of it all, it teaches them about life and death. When that animal passes away, that they got to learn that death is a part of life.
Yep.
And they learn to cope with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah, we just had our beloved dog put down in February this year, and it was full on heartbreaking. And my wife and I are still getting over it. My wife will tell us that it's like she's lost a third child. We had Smokes from the time our kids were about 3, and he grew up with them. And I reckon we're sort of going off track about fatherhood and parenting here, but I reckon you have dogs in different stages of your life. So as a young boy, you'll probably have a dog that you grow up with. You might then have a dog as a young bachelor, that you go for runs with and that sort of thing.
Pick up chicks with,
you go down the park with, and meet your future wife, whatever down there. Your cute dog. But then you'll also have a dog that I reckon plays a part in your as you're a grown man. You might be a little bit more distant from that dog, but it's more your kid's dog. And Smokey was that for us, and he was a part of the family. He was such a beautiful dog. I reckon he understood English. He knew how our family ticked. He was such a beautiful natured dog. Anyway, he got crook, and come February we had to make the decision of putting him down. He was uncomfortable. He couldn't walk anymore, and it was his time. And we asked our kids. We said, "Look, do you want to be involved in?" The vet was coming over to our house. We went to a nice little area that he loved under the gazebo at the backyard, and we said, "Do you want to be around Smokes when he's put down, when he passes away?" And straight away they said, "Yeah." They did not hesitate, and I was really proud of that. And they came out, and we were all blubbering, we were all in tears. But my kids held him. They held him as he drifted away, and I just thought, what a great lesson in life for them. And I was also really proud of their courage to be a part of it. It would have been a lot easier to go, no, I don't want to watch it, and just be away from that experience. But they got involved, and it was.
It's part of that empathy and compassion, isn't it? I want to be there so he's comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think.
Yeah, I think having a dog in your family is a really important thing. And going along what you just said there, Smitty, about having the love of an animal. I think dogs, even cats, to some extent, but you can't go wrong with a dog, Yeah.
Good for allergies too, for kids. Just going off on a tangent, but exposure to animals and
gut health,
that sort of thing, gut health, it's definitely proven to increase their health. Yeah.
We got anything else we wanted to discuss in this topic? Are we?
Oh, we could go on forever. I think there's a lot of things you could talk about advice or sort of rules. I would always just say to dads, always tell your kids you love them. Always be free with hugs. Hug all the time. Lots of cuddles, lots of I love yous.
Yeah.
Your kids aren't going to know that you love them unless you tell them.
Yeah.
I think they need a lot of physical hugs and things.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The comfort of, a tough day at school or something.
Yeah.
Hug. Yeah. And it was funny. My wife and I were walking our other dog down the park yesterday, and we come across a bloke around the corner who had a pram. Obviously, just had a newborn, a little freshie, and he had a little daughter as well, and he was pushing the pram, obviously trying to get the kid to sleep. And I said, got a new one. He goes, just can't wait for this to be over, sort of thing, And I said, mate,
Yeah.
you don't wish too hard because, and I always say this to new dads, don't wish the time away because the time goes so fast. Before you know it, they are teenagers. And although it's hard, some of the times of being a parent can be difficult and challenging. Just sort of immerse yourself in it. And I know you've got other shit going on. You know, you got work, you got bills, you got to go and do your workout, your exercise, you got your missus, you got other commitments. But the child is such a precious part of your life that you've only got a short amount of time to have an influence. And before you know it, they've got wings and they're on their own. So don't wish that time away.
No, not at all. Yeah.
That's a good advice, I reckon.
What about the consideration of, in the modern context, guys? What are some of the challenges that we're facing? And I think it's probably a cool thing to explore because we're all at different phases of parenthood in terms of the age of our children. But we spoke about the environment from the context of our parents and what they were faced with, and how some of those things have rolled down to impact us as young men and as fathers. But what about some of the challenges and concerns? I spend an unhealthy amount of time up at night, worrying about the future for our kids, and I'm sure you guys are doing the same thing. But what are maybe we explore some of these challenges and talk about them and see if we can't normalise those a little bit for people.
Yeah, definitely, mate. There's a lot of challenges, and I considered this before we started chatting today. And
everything's a challenge, I reckon.
Yeah, there are certain the way the world's going at the moment. And I sort of consider the demasculation of men in society and sort of driven to us by media and you look at some advertisements and even movies, they make the male character in it seem to be a dopey, stupid
bumbling
bastard,
idiot,
a bubbling idiot.
Yeah.
Men are being demasculinized for whatever reason there is some sort of agenda, and some people will call me a conspiracy theorist on this, but I don't really care. I just think that there is a demasculination of men, and I think a part of that is the gender neutral language. Now that's crept into our society. So there are things like the gestational, the non-gestational parent, or the lactating parent, the birthing or the non-birthing parent, and things like this, trying to avoid or trying to dehumanize or blur the meaning of man and woman. And look, I totally understand that there are families out there with two dads, or homosexual relationships who have families, and I'm all for that. I'm all for any family environment. Exactly.
Yeah,
so as long as that a child is being brought up with love and in an environment that is nurturing, I don't care who the parents are. Two blokes, three blokes, man and woman, two women, whatever. But I just don't think we need to be blurring the definition of a man and a woman, and coming up with these things, chest feeding and all this sort of stuff. What's wrong with the word breastfeed? I don't have breasts. I'm a man. I have a chest. I don't chest feed. All these sort of terminologies are becoming a little bit sort of commonplace. Whether it be a leftist world we're heading in, I don't know. But I just think that is a challenge, particularly for fathers.
I think one of the issues is nobody wants to be seen as, what's the word, bigoted or, so there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Virtue signaling, probably.
Yeah.
But I'll not bullied into using that language, but I will use that language because I don't want to be seen as, I'm not a bigot. I don't want to be seen as being that way.
You have a desire to fit into societal norms, and you don't want to be the outsider.
Yeah, I don't want to be called a racist because I'm not. But if I use certain terminology, or if I'm not using the right pronoun, somebody's going to say, "Oh, you bigot," I think that's an issue.
Yeah, and that's their issue, mate. I reckon someone referring to you as something like that at a whim without, really delving into your personality.
Yeah.
I think that's
Oh,
quite
it's
shallow on their behalf.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
People are quick to label others. Yeah, I mean, you're the least racist, sexist person I know. You're a very worldly person. For someone that's it's a cheap shot, I think.
But just in general, I mean, you don't want to use the incorrect language and be labelled something else or something that you're not.
Yeah. But how can you be labelled something by using the term man and woman as incorrect? You know what I mean?
But I guess that's how far we've gone away, and I guess that's what you're getting at, is that's a bit of an issue.
So, I mean, the solution for our family at this stage, having a young daughter, controversial, is we don't watch any TV in the house at all. We don't watch any.
Yeah.
So Charlotte has never watched TV with us.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah, good. Well done.
It's obviously not a solution forever, but we don't feel like she needs it at an early stage.
Yeah.
I'm aware she watches a little bit when she goes to her grandparents' house, but she'll watch like Thomas the Tank Engine or sort of like children's type shows.
Yeah.
But I think when they're very early, say like 7 or less, and they're sort of more open to sort of being imprinted, I just don't think it's worthwhile, like for our family, for her to watch TV. So that's what we've chosen to do. But we do get a lot of people who really take exception to that and feel like we're really going to ruin her life by not letting her watch telly. She can catch up when she's older, and it's not going to be like she's 16, she can't watch TV or anything like that.
At least by then, mate, she's maybe formed her own opinions and values, and they haven't been sort of forced or subliminally.
That's the one that we're
forced upon her.
That's the one we're trying to avoid. Is that I believe children are very susceptible to imprinting when they're young.
Yep.
So I think I've read when they're less than 7, they sort of have different brain waves to us, and they're more in like a dreamlike state, and their minds are very much more open. So I feel like if there is any sort of imprinting that's going to go on, it's probably when they're younger. So that's something that we've chosen to do, and it's a really hard way to parent because you can never, ever plonk them down in front of the TV and you think, I can buy myself half an hour here while she watches
I think that's
Postman Pat.
It's a bit of a trap.
Well, it is a bit of a trap because I think to myself sometimes, it would be so easy if we watched telly and I could get up in the morning, I'm feeling a bit tired, could just flick on the box and buy myself a little bit of time to go and do something. But at the same time, hopefully it's worthwhile.
And I think that can lead us into, Smitty, one of the other challenges, and I think that's technology. Mick, I don't know whether your kids are getting a bit older now with your young daughter as well, but my kids are fully immersed into technology and social media, and I think for parents in the modern world, I think that's a massive challenge. And I was talking to my wife about this, and she said, you can't deny them technology because it is going to be a part of their life as much as we resist it because we never grew up with it. Well, I didn't. For them, it is going to be their way of life. They will probably accept artificial intelligence, and they will accept having maybe a brain chip or something like that where they can communicate with someone else without having a device in their hand. But to me, that's inhuman, or not human. But to them, that future is sort of a reality for them. And we need to sort of accept and give them the technology, but also give them guidelines on how to safely use it. What would you say, Mick? I mean, social media, technology.
I think it's arguably our greatest challenge, guys. And I think that you're spot on what you're saying. The reality is that the algorithms and the technology is now so advanced that it's outside of the scope of control. And so what I mean by that is that as we know, our phones, our tablets, our computers, they are all decoding and taking away messages from every single thing that we do, from the things that we look at, the phone calls we make, the people we interact with. Every single piece of information is basically fed in. And so what we now know is happening is that what is then presented to us in the way of advertisements, in the way of new videos and things like that is strategically designed to keep us online. And in that process is where these addictive states develop. And where this becomes really, really dangerous is as adults, we're able to rationalize, although there are large numbers of adults that are also addicted to social media, but we're far better, I guess, able to deal with the nuances of social media and all of that stuff. Our kids aren't. Okay, they haven't developed the resilience. They haven't developed the coping mechanisms. They haven't developed the strategies. All of these things that are required in order to mitigate that addiction and that sort of thing. And so we're establishing a generation of kids here who are highly traumatized and anxious because they aren't actually able to cope with the amount of information that they're processing. And I remember a couple of years ago in one of my psychology units reading a statistic that kids are taking in something like, I think it was 100 million pieces of information a second.
Wow. Now
that's not conscious information, that's subconscious, unconscious, conscious. So that's, from every single thing that they wire into with their tablet is just being received, and they've never, ever, ever, ever had to do that in their lives. And they are just bombarded and they can't cope. And it's a real worry. It is a real worry because, as we know, addictions are very real things. We tend to look at addictions in the way of drugs and alcohol and things like this. But this, in my eyes, the pandemic, I've said this before, the real pandemic across the globe at the moment is a mental health pandemic. And I would argue that if it's not the worst component of it, it'd be in the top 3, and it's these addictions to social media.
Yeah,
there are things you can do with devices and whatnot. I mean, they don't have to sit on them forever. There are parental controls you can put on, apps.
Yep.
Screen time limits.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I mean, we're similar to you guys, Rooster, in that, my kids use an iPad and technology, but we allow it when it suits. They get half an hour to an hour a day. Once that screen time is up, that's it.
Yeah,
there's no more.
That's good.
So there are bits and pieces you can do, but I completely understand that addictive nature of all the stuff that they do on there.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's also the comparisons, isn't it? Though like it's whether it's Instagram or Facebook. These kids are going on and they're comparing themselves to all of the other people, and in itself that is developing anxieties because they're feeling a necessity to be a certain way or in order to be accepted and all of these things. I agree, Jonesy, mitigating it and setting up boundaries and things like that's really, really important. But Jesus, it's just such a big issue, and globally, I think you're dead right. It's going to be technology advancement is going to be a part of their lives, and in order to survive, it needs to be imparted in some way. But those control measures, I think, are really, really important.
And I just think the reinforcement of the natural world and being a part of the natural world amongst all this modern technology life, you really need to emphasise that to your kids, to get out and get your sunshine and exercise and move and stuff like that. I think if you can create that balance, you're sort of halfway achieving something there.
We have you got to match your screen time with outdoor time.
Yep.
So if you have a half an hour, you've got to be outside for at least half an hour.
That's good.
You almost want to make them value their outdoor sort of real world nature time more than screen time, don't you? And I think sometimes like being unhappy or being a depressed teen maybe plays into more sort of like social media time, whereas if you're sort of happier and you're enjoying life more and you're really into your sports or your hobbies, your activities, you may find yourself wanting to go outside and do things more, and you might value that more than your than your phone.
Yeah.
Because I accept, kids are all going to be exposed to phones and technology and stuff later on, and they are going to have to find ways to interact with that in a healthy sort of manner. But yeah, I think maybe just if you're more connected, exactly like you said, Roo, with the natural world, hopefully you can find that balance. And then hopefully maybe as parents, we model healthy behaviour around it as well. So we're not glued to our phones while our kids are around, and they see us being present and not just sort of, checked out, sitting there checking our feed or whatever while our kids are in the room. So I think our own behaviour can definitely play into how our kids interact with it.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, I'll always try to put my phone down when I'm in the presence of my kids in case a conversation starts, or I'll try to prompt a conversation. But going back to the natural world, there goes your camping philosophy again.
Exactly.
Getting your kids out to an environment where
there
is no service.
Yep.
Getting them out in the natural world and making them and watch their faces as they go, oh wow, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
And
once they get out there, they love it.
Well, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, it's innate in us, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a part of us as humans used to be a part of the natural world, and unfortunately we're just sort of moving away from that connection.
Yeah, like we lit a little fire at our house last night just to burn off some sticks and stuff. We had a little pile of wood, and there's nothing that would have kept my little girl away from that.
Yeah.
And we had dinner, and then after dinner we sat outside and we sat around some chairs around a little campfire and had a chat. And
awesome.
Right up until she said, "Oh, I'm tired, I want to go to bed," sort of thing. But I can guarantee you anything in the house didn't even hold a candle to being out by the fire. Just loved it.
What is your definition of a small fire, though?
20 square feet. 6 meters high,
Mate, what a great lifestyle you live up there. I mean, instead of watching the telly before bed, you're watching the flames of a fire,
Yeah, I mean, I guess anyone can do that. Get a fire pit in your alfresco area. When we lived in the burbs on a very small, like a little 400 square meter block, we had one of those little chimeneas, those little steel things, and you put a little fire in there, and it's all the same thing. You can still put a bit of bread or a marshmallow or a kid or...
you got 5 metre by 5 metre by fire.
Last night's one was smaller. Just burning off a little bit of stuff.
But it's great that you guys have made that conscious decision. This is what we want for our family, and this is what we're doing. It's great.
Yeah.
I think it's good.
Yep.
I think also other challenges that we can talk about is... and I know this is going on a little bit of in time-wise, but I mean, it's a topic that you could talk about all day. I think imparting our own insecurities, and you mentioned earlier, like laying in bed at night thinking about your kid's future and all, and I think sometimes we can impart our own insecurities and our own sort of faults in a way to our kids. And I mentioned earlier, like that impatience thing, and I wonder whether my kids are going to develop that. But I remember this time once I was due to pick up my boy from school, and there was a miscommunication between my wife and I about where we were going to pick him up from, and there was confusion and so on, and he went somewhere, I went somewhere, and then by the time I got to the place where I thought he might be, he was somewhere else, and we had all these different places we could have collected him from. And anyway, 50 minutes later...
If only you had a phone, you could have just rung him, modern technology.
Well, he didn't have a phone. So...
Could have Facebook messaged him.
Yeah. I received a phone call by an unknown number about 50 minutes later, and I was full on peaking. Like my little boys in primary school, this is like going back years ago, and I was peaking out. My stressors, my own insecurities there of loss or whatever, I was peaking. Anyway, I got this phone call from an unknown number, and he had smartly gone to the pedestrian walk, the lollipop man who helps the kids cross the street, and he asked if he could ring, and I don't know how he remembered my number, but he rang, got my number, and he's only a little kid. Anyway, this lollipop man said, "Oh, look, your boy's here. I'll hold on to him whilst you come." So I've gone from one end of the school to the other, and I'll never forget this. And I've actually even wrote him a letter about it, and I put it in his little memory box. I've got memory boxes for the kids. It's
cute.
Yeah, you call it cute. Yeah, call it whatever. But I've got these two boxes, these two tubs where I just put random stuff about their childhood, like say teddy bears, notes. So all those things that you put in their boxes, and I put this note in for him to read later. I didn't think he would understand at his age now, but I explained to him the fact that when I did meet him at the Lollipop Man, I opened up the door, and instead of me with a smile on my face saying, "There you are, mate. I'm so glad I found you." I open up the door to this little kid with tears rolling down his face. I said, "Where you been, mate? I couldn't find you." And I was angry at him. And it was my own insecurity coming out at my boy, and I only made him more upset. Yeah. And as we drove home, tears were rolling down his cheek because he felt he'd upset me. Then it had hit me, and I'm thinking, fucking hell, what sort of father are you? So I'm trying to explain on my way home, mate, I wasn't angry at you. I was just angry at my lack of communication with mum and blah, 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 my mistake. I didn't know where to pick you up from. And he he just sat there and he cried. Anyway, that night, again, going to bed, I sat down with him and I apologised again for upsetting him. And he gave me a hug and he said, "That's okay, Dad," like that, without any ill will or bad feeling towards me whatsoever. Total, absolute forgiveness. And it brought a tear to my eye, and I'll never forget it. But it made me realise that we have our own little insecurities, and at times, we get built up with angst and stress and all this, and we unwillingly take it out on our children. And I would just say to any parent, when you open that door and you see a crying little boy, try to just think of that instance and just try to respond in another way. And it will just go so far, and it'll make you feel better, it'll make them feel better, and it will just ease the whole situation. I could have just responded in such a better way, but I failed at that moment. And I told my son in this letter, which one day I hope he reads, at that time I failed, and I just hope that you by reading this might be aware of it when you're a father and not repeat it. So
I reckon also a really important takeout of that, which you did really well, is you went back and you corrected your mistake.
Yeah.
So like as parents, we never get it right all the time. We mess stuff up and you think I could have done that better, but what an awesome sort of like lesson and practice that you went back and you said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I was feeling like this and this is what I should have done, or something like that. I think that's really a super important like correcting your mistake and sort of letting him know after the fact.
It would be interesting.
This is what I was
see,
thinking, and this is what I should have done. I think that's super important. No, not at all. Yeah.
You did not fail. And we all do this. We all do this route, and it's 100%. What you're really talking about there is acting out of fear. Yeah. And we all do that, and it's such a great example, and it's a great take home for everyone to just consider your actions in moments of fear, particularly with your kids. And that's probably a great take home as well for everyone, is consider your actions in those moments of fear. But I think that one thing you definitely didn't do is fail. And we've said this countless times on here, in every moment, in every lesson, in every challenge, there's opportunity, and the new opportunity there became the lesson about owning your mistakes.
Showing
and showing empathy and stepping up and being a man. Being a man, and I think we'd all agree with this, is about owning mistakes. It's about having the courage to say when you feel you haven't done something quite right, sorry. And you did that. And that's a lesson that I know you would want to impart on him.
Yeah, a great lesson. Showing him you were man enough to go back and admit that you were wrong and correct your mistake.
Yeah.
Good lesson.
Very good. Yeah. I wonder, have you spoken to your son about that incident since?
No.
It'd be interesting to see if he even remembers it.
Well, that's what I said in the letter. I said, you probably don't even remember this happening.
Yeah.
But you might remember the feeling that it evoked.
Subconsciously, it's probably still there.
Yeah.
Or unconsciously, it's imprinted on him somewhere, most likely.
Yeah.
Who knows? It might have been traumatic for him that he has remembered, or it might not have. It might have been over. You might have overplayed it in your mind.
Yeah.
Thinking, he's there, he's on his own.
Yeah.
And then maybe if you didn't own up to it
exactly
afterwards with that and say, "Sorry, bud, it probably shouldn't have happened like that. Hope you're all right." get a hug. It's all good, Dad.
Yeah.
He forgets about it. It's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
But if that's not something you address or correct, and he continues to think about it, maybe it sort of festers in your mind a bit more.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more. Maybe
Yeah.
you've taken something that could have potentially been a traumatic memory,
Mm.
and maybe by owning up to it and discussing it with him afterwards and saying, I didn't really mean that, I was feeling
Yeah.
this, and what I meant was this, maybe you've actually not made it traumatic and also made it a learning experience. So
Yeah.
no parent's perfect. Everyone's stuck
No,
stuff
no,
up
I
sometimes.
appreciate your feedback on that because I never really thought of it like that.
Yeah. But how good is it to be able to do that?
Yeah.
Say, look, sorry.
Yep.
I often do that with my kids and say, look, I overreacted in that situation.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mm.
I raised my voice. I shouldn't have.
Yep.
I
But-
think that's important, mate.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
you're showing that we do have flailings as
Yeah,
men.
we're not perfect.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's modeling healthy behaviour. I think is
Yeah.
what a father's responsibility is, and we could talk about other challenges like I reckon the law. There will be fathers out there that might be listening to this that are going through separations and stuff like that, and I think there's been certain parties within our government that are addressing the inadequacies of our family law court systems. I think a lot of men get burnt and harshly treated and treated like the guilty party of a breakup, particularly when there's custody cases with children and so on. I think the men get the harsh end of the stick with being guilty before proven innocent, sort of thing. And I read some stats that men will often quit a case or a custody case because they're told that going down this track's going to have more harm on your children as opposed to you being successful in getting custody. So they'll just pull the pin on it. There's a lot of inadequacies with representation in the law. I believe that there's a lot of legal aid provided for the female involved in it, or the wife, where a man has to represent himself or get legal assistance and pay for that, or expenses are covered by the man in it. I think there's a lot of inadequacies, and I just wanted to bring that to the fore, that there are sort of support networks out there for blokes that might be experiencing that issue, and I come across this really good website called AustralianMen'sRights.com, and they had they represent this AMRA group, Australia's Men's Rights Advocates, and they were actually all for assisting men with information and services with unfair family court methods.
Okay.
I found that quite interesting, and I thought that the four of us here are very fortunate enough that we aren't experiencing that, but I reckon there's probably men out there or fathers that could be experiencing issues with a breakup, maybe losing custody of children, and I just think that it's such an unfair process in a lot of cases where men are believed to be the perpetrator of things, and I think a lot of the times we hear negative connotations in the media about men and husbands and that sort of thing, and without going down a rabbit hole on this, there are misinformation and lies associated with domestic violence and stuff to promote certain agendas. I'm not denying the fact that there are abusive men in relationships, but there also are abusive women in relationships or abusive mothers. That also needs to be factored in. It's not always a man that is the perpetrator. And I just think that men need to be aware of those services that are out there. And I'll just finish this little spiel with this quote that I read. This is a quote from a Dr. David Popenoa, a professor of sociology at Rutgers University, and he's a co-director of the National Marriage Project. And he says, fathers are far more than just second adults in the home. Involved fathers, especially biological fathers, bring positive benefits to their children that no other person is likely to bring. They provide protection and economic support and male role models. They have a parenting style that is significantly different from that of a mother, and that difference is important in healthy child development. I think that's a great quote. And so any father that's going down that track of possibly losing time with their children, fight like buggery, dig your heels in to get your fair share of having that equal parent relationship. I think that's just integral, and it's for the benefit of every child out there. You know, to have their father around and to be a constant force in their life.
Yeah.
You know, and I used to coach footy, and this little anecdote. I used to always, I could always tell the young boys whose FIFO dads were away. When the FIFO dad was away, the boy at footy training would always be playing up. He'd be restless. He'd be like mucking around, not concentrating. When Dad was back, I could tell straight away. I knew Dad was back because at footy training he was well behaved. He was more grounded and he was more attentive. And I just think that little experience for me really signifies the importance of dads being around.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, having access to both parents, mum and dad, super important.
Yep.
Yeah. So the yin and the yang, like you said, CJ.
Yeah, a lot of balance.
Yeah.
Balance it out.
That balancing of those energies is really important, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Roo. I've just watched a close friend of mine who I know listens to this podcast go through exactly that. He's one of the great human beings that I've got in my life, and he's absolutely been put through the ringer, and I think he'll take, a bit away from what you just said. And if he is listening today, we are thinking of you, mate, and you'll know who this is. And he and others should know they just have to reach out and talk. And we've said that before. That's a particular pressure that I think really does grind people away. I can't imagine having access to my children taken away from me, and whether it's the mother or the father, it's a horrible thing. So
yeah,
look for some help, definitely.
Very good. Any last words? We might have to wrap it up there.
we'll have to wrap it up. Let's wrap it up on a positive.
Yeah.
I just sort of brought the whole mood down a little bit with the law and.
Well, I reckon the positive that you take out of that is, like you said, it's all about balance.
Yeah.
It comes back to everything we talk about, with everything to do with ancestral living, ancestral health, mental health. Balance, isn't it?
Yes.
Balance is the key.
Yep.
We need paternal and maternal influences, just like we need balance in every other aspect of our life.
Done.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
That's a great way to finish it, Smitty.
Great finish.
Wise words from the man.
Well, it's great to have a chat,
Yeah.
as always, fellas.
Yeah, nice
Great
chat, boys.
stuff.
I mean, we could chat here for ages
Oh,
on this topic.
such a
couldn't we?
big topic.
You know,
We could
being fathers.
2 hours on this, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not an easy gig, but it's very rewarding. It's probably the best thing you ever do in your whole life, isn't it? So
Oh, totally.
100%.
Like we say, we're not experts, but we've had some experiences and we're just kind of imparting those and what worked and what hasn't for us. And hopefully people can take something away from the last couple of hours we've been chatting.
It's gone quick.
Yeah.
good stuff.
We'll see you next
Right,
week,
yeah.
eh?
Till next time.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys.
Good on
See
you,
you
boys.
See ya.